Example 3, write in standard form. Write x squared minus 8x minus y equals negative 18 in standard form. Identify the vertex, focus, axis of symmetry, and directrix. Then graph the problem. All right, here's what we're going to have to use when they give us this form, and then you can tell that they don't have the parentheses around the x and the squared and all that. How do we get it into that normal standard form? Is we're going to have to use an age-old Algebra 2 trick called completing the square. Here's how I start. I find the squared term, which in this case is x, and so I'm going to put all x's on the left and everything else that's single without a square on the right. So the y will go over, negative 18 will stay in the right, but this negative 8x will stay with this x. So we'll have x squared minus 8x, and I'm going to leave a blank here, equals, when this moves over this way, it's going to become positive y minus 18. Next thing is you check to see if there's a coefficient here. If there is a coefficient, right now it's just 1, you would divide everything by that. Now 1, I don't have to divide everything because it won't change anything, so I'll just erase that 1. From there we do completing the square. So how do you complete the square? You take your b term. Remember how this is ax squared plus bx plus c? You take your b term, you divide it by 2, which gives us negative 4. And then you're going to square this. This will give us our c term. So negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. Now anything you do on the left, you also got to do on the right. So I'm going to add 16 over there. So far what I've done is I've made an ax squared plus bx plus c. Now the reason I do that is notice that if I wanted to simplify this, I could do a x method and say, okay, a times c goes on top, b goes on the bottom. Here I had that 1 times 16, so I have 16 there, and then I have negative 8 on the bottom. What are factors of 16 that add up to negative 8? Answer, negative 4 and negative 4. So I could rewrite this as x minus 4 times x minus 4, also known as x minus 4 squared. See how this is the form that I wanted this equation to be in to begin with? Now, the reason we do completing the square is it'll always give us this form. This term right here that we squared will always be the number that turns out there. So as in the future, you don't even need to do x method. You could just say this right here, this trinomial, will simplify to the perfect square, x minus 4 squared. Now let's go to the right. I have y minus 18 plus 16, which would be y minus 2 when you simplify. This here would be the actual equation in simplified form. We have simplified, we got a parenthesis here, and there's no number to factor out right there, and so you would be done. But I don't like to do it this way because I like to have 2 parentheses. It makes it easier. So though that is the answer, I'm going to go one more time and just rewrite it like this. What I would do is I would say, okay, what number is right here? It's a 1. So if I factor out a 1, I'd be left with this, because this will make it easier for finding the other pieces of information and ask us to find. It said identify the vertex. So start there. The vertex, I'm going to use this form, will be the opposite because we're in the inside here. So it'd be right 4 units. This will be up 2 units. And you might be thinking, well, this would not be opposite. But that's why I rewrote it this way. It's because you need to treat this as if it were in parentheses. So that's why I went ahead and did so there. It makes it easier. Just all the rules stay the same. So that's the vertex. Next, we'd find the focus. Now remember, to find the focus, you take this term and say 4p equals 1. So p would equal 1/4, or we could do it as 0.25. That being the case, it's next to y. I would add that to the 2. So I'd get 2.25. That's my focus. Next comes the axis of symmetry. And so to find your axis of symmetry, you look at what value is staying the same. In this case, the x. So I'd say that x equals 4. And then finally, my directrix. Directrix is always the opposite letter. So if this one's x, this will be y. Not only that, it'll be the opposite of what I did with the focus. In the focus, I added 0.25. So this time I'll subtract 0.25. And so I would get 1.75 when I say 2 minus 0.25. That'll be my directrix. If you look at the picture, you'll see that, in fact, everything is aligned as we said it should be. They have a typo right here. They put x equals 2. It should be x equals 4. That's what we got. But if you look, they graphed it correctly. They did put this line here right 4 units. If you just count over 1, 2, 3, 4, they did do right 4 units. They just put a 2 there. So that's a 4. But everything else, you'll notice that focus is right where we said it should be, 4 and then 2.25, and it's located right there. There's the vertex, which they didn't label, but it'd be 4, 2. Right 4 units up to, here's my directrix at 1.75 or 1 3/4. So we did everything right. Let's try another one. Let's take this one. So again, I look for my squared term. It's x. So that means that x's are going to go on the right, or excuse me, the left, and everything else is going to go to the right. So this will move over this way. I'm going to leave a blank there. And so when I move this over, I'll have positive 12y minus 44, because the negative becomes positive when I move it over. Next, I check to see if I have a coefficient in front of x squared. I do. It's 2. So I'm going to divide everything by 2 before I begin. So I'm actually going to begin with x squared minus 4x blank equals 6y minus 22. From here, I take my b, I divide it by 2. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, and then I square that to get my c value. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. So positive 4 goes on both sides. Again, why do we do this? Is because this will simplify to be x minus 2. That's a perfect square. Again, if you don't believe me, I could come over here and show you by x method, doing a times c, which would be 1 times 4, and negative 4 down here. What are the factors of 4 that add up to negative 4? Well, it's negative 2 and negative 2, just like we said. So this would be x minus 2 squared. I come over here, and I have 6y minus 18. Now, I'm not done this time. Last time I said I was done. I circled it up, but it was because I did not have a coefficient here. If you have a coefficient, you need to factor that out. And so this is how we get our last parenthesis, is we'll say this is, I factor out that 6, I'd have y, this is kind of like reverse distribution. Negative 18 divided by 6 would be negative 3. This would be my equation right here. And so if I need to find all my information, my vertex, I can now easily find. It would be right 2 units, it would be the opposite there and the opposite there, up 3. My focus, I could find that by taking this value, saying that 4p equals 6. That means p equals 6 over 4, which could reduce to 3 over 2. Or we could say that is 1.5. And so 1.5, it's next to the y. So it'll affect the y value. Since it's positive, it'll add to it. So I'd have 3 plus 1.5 is 4.5. And then I would go on to my axis of symmetry. That's the value that stays the same. Here it's the 2's, which are in the place of x, so it'd be x equals 2. And finally, my directrix. If this is x, the directrix will be y equals, and you do the opposite of the focus. So the focus added 1.5, so this time I subtract 1.5. 3 minus 1.5 is 1.5. And these would be my values there. And so that's how I could put together a graph. Also, I'll point out that this would be a vertical parabola because the focus is next to the y. So here's now one for you to try.